At our son's extravagant estate unveiling, my wife grabbed my wrist. Her grip was startlingly tight, her fingernails pressing sharply into the fabric of my tailored suit. She pulled me close, her voice trembling just beneath the ambient hum of a live jazz quartet and clinking crystal glasses. "We need to leave this house right now." I stared at her, completely bewildered. "Why? What is the matter?" She refused to elaborate, her eyes darting nervously toward the grand mahogany staircase. She remained entirely mute until we had navigated through the sea of wealthy guests and locked ourselves securely inside our sedan. Finally, she turned to face me. Her skin was practically translucent under the streetlights as she asked, "You did not actually read the finalized property deeds, did you?" What she revealed next caused the blood to freeze in my veins. "My name is Arthur Sterling. I turned 68 years old last week, and I have dedicated the last 4 decades of my existence to building Sterling Precision Manufacturing from a tiny machine shop into a leading supplier of aerospace components. My wife, Eleanor, and I sacrificed our youth to ensure our only son, Julian, would never know the financial terror we experienced early in our marriage. We funded his Ivy League education. We financed his ostentatious wedding to Vanessa, and just 2 months ago, I authorized a wire transfer of $1.5 million. It was the down payment for a breathtaking $3 million modern architectural masterpiece in the exclusive hills of the state. It was meant to be their permanent sanctuary, a beautiful environment to raise our future grandchildren. That was my intention, or so I believed. Tonight was the highly anticipated unveiling gala. The sprawling circular driveway was jammed with imported sports cars and luxury SUVs. Waitstaff in crisp white uniforms circulated with trays of caviar and imported champagne. Yet, an unsettling atmosphere hung over the evening the moment Eleanor and I arrived. Julian and Vanessa were completely absent from their hosting duties. Instead, Vanessa's mother, Genevieve, was holding court in the center of the massive sunken living room. Genevieve was a notoriously vain woman who operated under the delusion of aristocratic grandeur, despite having never worked a legitimate day in her life. She was parading through the house, issuing sharp commands to the catering staff, and boasting about the imported Italian marble as though she had financed the entire project herself. I attempted to brush off my irritation. I reasoned she was simply an overbearing mother, intoxicated by her daughter's elevated social status. I took a glass of sparkling water and retreated to the periphery, observing my son. Julian appeared physically ill. He constantly adjusted his cuffs, nervously avoiding my line of sight. Whenever I moved to intercept him, Vanessa would miraculously materialize, hooking her arm through his and steering him toward another group of wealthy strangers. The air felt unbreathable. I felt like an unwanted trespasser inside a fortress my own capital had constructed. That was the moment Eleanor dug her nails into my wrist. Her face was a mask of pure terror. Eleanor is a woman of immense fortitude. She navigated the turbulent, lean years of our startup with absolute stoicism. Witnessing her in a state of sheer panic sent a cold dread pooling in my stomach. I followed her out the massive double doors, abandoning the suffocating luxury of the party. The brisk night air provided zero comfort to my racing pulse. We practically sprinted down the illuminated stone pathway to my car. Once inside, Eleanor instantly engaged the locks. She was hyperventilating, clutching her evening bag against her chest like a shield. I gripped the steering wheel, demanding answers. "Eleanor, you need to tell me what is happening. Did Genevieve insult you?" My patience was rapidly evaporating. She shook her head, fighting for oxygen. "Arthur, the house. You assured me you wired the funds to Julian's escrow account. You swore this property was secured for our son." "It is for our son," I countered, a deep knot of anxiety forming in my gut. I authorized the transfer personally. The corporate attorneys drafted the preliminary contracts. Everything was placed in Julian and Vanessa's names. "What is the issue?" Eleanor closed her eyes, a solitary tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. I went upstairs to find a private bathroom. I passed the primary suite and noticed the door to the custom architectural library was slightly ajar. Genevieve was inside. Eleanor paused, swallowing thickly. "Arthur." She was standing at the drafting table with a glass of champagne, pointing out a framed document on the wall to her country club friends. They were laughing. They were laughing at your expense. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "Laughing at what, Eleanor? What exactly did you see?" She looked directly into my eyes, her voice vibrating with a devastating blend of grief and absolute fury. "It was the finalized property deed. It was professionally framed and mounted directly above the desk." I stepped inside the room, pretending to admire the bookshelves. "Arthur." I read the names on that legal document. My knuckles turned white against the leather steering wheel. "Julian and Vanessa," I said, though a sickening realization was already taking root in my mind. "No," Eleanor whispered. "Julian's name is entirely absent. Vanessa's name is nowhere to be found. The entire estate is legally registered to a private limited liability company." "An LLC," I echoed. my mind rapidly sifting through the implications of corporate property law. Which LLC? Vanguard Heritage, Eleanor replied. The atmosphere in the vehicle became instantly toxic. Vanguard. That was the fabricated ancestral name Genevieve used to inflate her imaginary European lineage. I stared out the windshield into the darkness, my brain misfiring as I tried to process the sheer audacity of my wife's words. Are you absolutely positive about this? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous, gravelly register. I am positive, Eleanor said, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I saw the municipal watermark. I saw the date of execution. It was finalized 3 weeks ago. Immediately after your wire transfer cleared, Arthur, you did not secure a future for our son. You purchased a $3 million compound for Genevieve. She is the sole proprietor. I sat paralyzed in the driver's seat, the silence in the car ringing in my ears. 4 decades of grueling labor, 4 decades of missed holidays and late nights at the manufacturing plant, all to guarantee my son would never face financial ruin, and he had taken the fruits of my life's work and surrendered the deed to his vicious, manipulative mother-in-law. My own flesh and blood had engineered a catastrophic fraud while smiling to my face. The sheer disrespect was crippling. The betrayal was absolute. But the initial shock rapidly crystallized into a cold, methodical rage. I am not a man who surrenders to emotional hysteria. I am an engineer. I dismantle problems. I retrieved my phone from my jacket pocket and dialed Julian's private line. It rang repeatedly. I visualized my son standing in that opulent living room, acting the part of the successful aristocrat while his mother-in-law held the actual leash. Finally, the line connected. Julian, I stated, my voice echoing coldly in the confined space of the car. We require a conversation immediately. But the voice that responded did not belong to my son. A shrill, profoundly arrogant laugh blasted through the receiver. Oh, Arthur. Genevieve's voice practically purred with venomous delight. Julian is entirely too preoccupied moving my imported statues into the Grand Conservatory. I must thank you, though. Your little financial contribution was quite generous. The call terminated abruptly. I stared at the blank screen. The only sound was Eleanor softly weeping in the passenger seat. Genevieve had just validated every horrific suspicion blooming in my mind. I shifted the car into drive and navigated us back to our home. Sleep was a physical impossibility. I sequestered myself in my home office, the very room where I had sketched the initial blueprints for Sterling Precision. I powered up my desktop and accessed the county real estate portal. It required less than 5 minutes to verify Eleanor's discovery. The deed to the $3 million property was unequivocally registered to Vanguard Heritage LLC. I pulled the state corporate registry. The exclusive managing director of Vanguard Heritage was Genevieve. My son and his wife possessed absolutely zero legal equity in the estate my money had procured. I printed the documents. The machine whirred in the quiet night, producing the undeniable proof of my son's treachery. I compiled the pages into a pristine leather portfolio and waited for the dawn. At precisely 6:30 inches the morning, I parked in the executive garage of Sterling Precision Manufacturing. Normally, the sight of this sprawling facility filled me with profound satisfaction. Today, it felt like a monument to my own naive foolishness. I bypassed security with a silent nod. I ignored my own executive suite and marched directly toward the financial sector. Julian was the vice president of finance. I had promoted him to that position 2 years ago, operating under the catastrophic delusion that he possessed the moral fortitude to inherit my legacy. I slammed open the heavy glass door to his office without a word of warning. Julian was seated at his expansive desk, clutching a mug of coffee, deeply engrossed in a spreadsheet. He jumped at the loud intrusion. "Dad," he sputtered, quickly plastering a hollow, practiced smile across his face. "Why are you in the building so early? I assumed you and Mom would be recovering from the gala. You vanished before we could even pop the vintage champagne." I did not reciprocate his false warmth. I closed the distance between us, stopping inches from his desk. I scrutinized the man sitting before me, searching for the boy I had raised. All I found was a slick corporate operator, draped in Italian wool purchased with my capital, spinning a massive web of deception in the very building I constructed. I unclasped the leather portfolio. Without uttering a single syllable, I withdrew the highlighted municipal property records and slapped them violently onto the center of his desk. Julian flinched backward, his eyes dropped to the papers. I watched the arrogant color completely drain from his cheeks. His confident executive posture collapsed. Sweat instantly beaded across his forehead as he read the name I had circled in red ink. Vanguard Heritage. Would you care to articulate why my $1.5 million capital injection was utilized to purchase a luxury compound for your mother-in-law? I asked, my tone lethally quiet. Dad, please, this is a massive misunderstanding, he stammered, his voice cracking. entirely devoid of its usual polished cadence. You are missing critical context. The financial architecture of this purchase is highly complex. I comprehend it with perfect clarity, I countered, leaning my weight onto my palms against his desk. I comprehend that I provided the capital to secure your family's foundation, and you covertly legally transferred the asset to Genevieve. She even intercepted your phone last night to gloat about my financial contribution. You have exactly 60 seconds to provide a truthful explanation before I contact the federal banking authorities and report a catastrophic wire fraud. Julian aggressively wiped his brow. He was drowning in panic. Before his mind could construct a plausible fabrication, the office door swung open again. Vanessa strolled in, holding 2 artisan lattes and a box of imported pastries. "Arthur," she chimed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We certainly did not anticipate seeing you today." "Clearly," I replied, my eyes remaining fixed on Julian. Vanessa approached the desk. Her eyes darted to the highlighted legal documents scattered across the wood. Her posture instantly became rigid, a defensive hostility radiating from her body. She positioned herself between me and Julian, acting as a human shield. Her sweet demeanor evaporated into pure venom. "Are you seriously running covert background checks on public records just to spy on us?" Vanessa demanded, her voice rising in aggressive indignation. "I find it absolutely appalling that you would violate our marital privacy like this, Arthur." "Violate your privacy?" I repeated, my volume rising. "I handed you over $1 million of my personal wealth, Vanessa. I possess the absolute right to know whose signature is on the bottom of that title. It was presented as a gift," she snapped viciously. "A gift implies relinquishing control. It means you trust your son to execute the proper financial strategy for his household. Instead, you are lurking in the shadows, investigating us as if we are hostile corporate spies. It is wildly inappropriate and deeply toxic, Arthur." Julian latched onto her aggressive energy, finding a pathetic shred of courage behind his wife's skirt. "Vanessa is entirely correct, Dad," he said, adopting a tone of wounded disappointment. "We are grown adults handling complex assets. You cannot just barge into my workspace and hurl severe legal accusations simply because you are ignorant of modern tax sheltering mechanisms. You are being irrational and emotional." A wave of profound disgust washed over me. They were operating in total synergy. They looked at me not with a shred of guilt, but with intense, unified annoyance that their scheme had been questioned. "I am being emotional?" I asked softly. "You classify covertly funneling a $3 million estate to Genevieve as a tax sheltering mechanism?" Julian exhaled a long, theatrical sigh. He slid open his desk drawer and produced a thick binder bearing the logo of a high-end corporate accounting firm. "I intended to spare you the exhausting details of our asset protection strategy, Dad. You are supposed to be transitioning into a peaceful retirement, but since you insist on operating under the assumption that I am a criminal, I will educate you." He dropped the binder onto the desk and met my gaze with a chilling, calculated sociopathy. His panic had vanished. He was fully prepared to execute a rehearsed, intricate lie to my face. "Please sit down, Dad," Julian commanded, gesturing to the chair. "Allow me to illuminate how contemporary wealth transfer actually functions. This binder validates every decision we made," he added condescendingly. "And when I conclude this explanation, I fully expect a formal apology for this aggressive intrusion." I stared at him. After a lifetime of building a massive enterprise, he truly believed I was a senile amateur who could be blinded by corporate jargon. Julian opened the binder, smoothing the pages with practiced authority. "Dad, executing a massive real estate transaction is fraught with federal penalties. The government aggressively penalizes direct intergenerational wealth transfers. Had you routed that money directly into our joint accounts, the federal gift tax liabilities would have been absolutely astronomical. It would have liquidated our liquid assets before we even purchased furniture." He tapped a manicured finger against a dense matrix of tax brackets. "Vanessa's mother retains a brilliant financial architect, a man who shelters wealth for European dignitaries. He mandated that the most legally insulated method to absorb your capital was to filter it through a temporary holding proxy. Vanguard Heritage is nothing but a phantom shell, Dad. It acts as a legal quarantine. Genevieve is merely serving as a temporary custodian. If you look at the timeline in this contract, the LLC is scheduled for complete dissolution in precisely 120 days. On day 121, the title automatically reverts exclusively to Vanessa and myself. We were shielding your capital from predatory taxation. We managed the stressful legal logistics so you could enjoy your twilight years in peace. It was a spectacular performance. The terminology was flawless. On the surface, the strategy sounded highly sophisticated and deeply responsible. An average man would have felt a rush of relief and praised his son's financial brilliance. But I had spent my entire life battling corporate tax attorneys. I knew instantly that every single syllable was a meticulously constructed piece of fiction. You do not utilize a relative's personal LLC to circumvent federal gift taxes on a primary domestic residence. It was legally preposterous. It was a bedtime story wrapped in accounting vernacular. I maintained a completely stoic expression. I allowed a heavy, agonizing silence to fill the room when he finished. That silence began to fracture Vanessa's confidence. She recognized that the spreadsheet had not extinguished the cold calculation in my eyes. She pivoted strategies instantly, abandoning her aggressive posture for a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Her eyes welled with perfectly manufactured tears, and her lower lip trembled convincingly. "Arthur, how could you possibly think we would betray you?" she whispered, her voice fracturing with artificial sorrow. My mother has exhausted herself for the past 2 months, navigating endless meetings with offshore lawyers just to ensure Julian and I were insulated from tax penalties. She absorbed the legal liability of the holding company out of pure maternal love. She made a massive sacrifice. And rather than expressing gratitude, you are treating her like a common thief. She placed a delicate hand on Julian's shoulder. We have labored endlessly to construct a life worthy of the sterling name. We planned a beautiful dinner in 120 days to surprise you with the finalized title transfer. We wanted to prove our maturity, but your immediate reaction is to assume we are monsters. Your inherent distrust is breaking Julian's heart, Arthur. It feels as though nothing he achieves will ever satisfy you. You are wielding your wealth as a weapon to control our marriage. Julian stood up and wrapped his arms around his weeping wife, staring at me with an expression of deep, tragic victimization. "Please, Dad," he begged softly, "do not destroy our family over a complex tax technicality. Mom was terrified last night. Vanessa is crying. We just want to live peacefully in the home you helped us secure. Give us the 120 days. You will see the title transfer legally. You will see that my integrity is flawless. Just trust me." I stood in the epicenter of the financial empire I had forged. My son and his wife were staring at me with pleading, tear-streaked faces, demanding my surrender. My instincts screamed that this real estate fraud was merely a smokescreen for a much darker, far more catastrophic conspiracy. The tax loophole explanation was too heavily rehearsed. Vanessa's crying was too cinematic. Genevieve's cruel laughter on the phone contradicted the narrative of a selfless, sacrificing custodian. I realized in that fraction of a second that a direct, aggressive confrontation would fail. They were fortified for a battle. They were not prepared for a total capitulation. To unearth the actual depth of their treason, I needed them to believe their manipulation had triumphed. I needed to transform into the exact, pathetic, declining old man they believed I was. I intentionally let my posture collapse, rounding my shoulders and letting out a shaky, rattling sigh. I rubbed my eyes, forcing my expression to soften from lethal rage to frail, profound exhaustion. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, keeping my voice raspy and weak. "I am just getting older, Julian. The world is moving too quickly, and these new financial architectures confuse me. When your mother saw Genevieve's name on that document, we simply panicked. I never intended to accuse you of anything criminal. I only wanted to ensure your future was safe. I apologize for my hostility. You are completely right. I should have trusted your education." The atmospheric shift in the office was instantaneous. The defensive rigidity melted from Julian's frame. Vanessa wiped her eyes, offering a condescending smile of forgiveness. They exchanged a microscopic, triumphant glance. The dinosaur had surrendered. "It is entirely fine, Dad," Julian said, his voice instantly regaining its arrogant executive timbre. "I understand you are operating out of misplaced concern. The apology is accepted. Let us consider the matter permanently closed." "Thank you, Julian," I replied softly. "I will let you return to your spreadsheets." I turned my back to them, adopting the slow, heavy, shuffling gait of a defeated elderly man. I reached for the thick glass handle of the office door. As I pulled it open, the harsh fluorescent lighting of the corridor hit the glass, transforming the heavy pane into a dark, perfect mirror. I kept my head bowed, but my eyes remained locked on the reflection. Julian believed the performance was over. He believed I was oblivious. In the reflection, I watched him violently throw himself back into his desk chair. He seized his computer mouse and began clicking with frantic, desperate speed. His dual monitors reflected clearly in the glass. He was aggressively dragging a heavily encrypted master folder directly into the server's permanent deletion bin. The text was large enough to read. The title of the file was Sterling, Employee, Retirement, Disbursements. The commute home was a masterclass in silent calculation. The image of Julian frantically erasing the employee pension disbursement logs looped endlessly in my mind. Defrauding me out of a $3 million house was simple greed, but tampering with the corporate pension fund was an act of profound, catastrophic criminality. I employed hundreds of machinists and engineers who trusted me with their life savings. If Julian was manipulating that capital, he was not just stealing my money, he was annihilating the futures of the people who built my company. I needed to ascertain exactly who was orchestrating this. Julian was greedy, but he lacked the sheer sociopathic nerve to execute a massive federal crime independently. Someone was pulling his strings. I needed to observe the power dynamics inside that mansion when they thought the doors were locked. I stopped at an exclusive horologist and purchased a remarkably expensive vintage mantel clock. It served as the perfect Trojan horse, an apology gift from a remorseful father. I pulled into the Vanguard Heritage Estate shortly after 1:00 p.m. The massive security gates were propped open for the landscape architects. I walked up the marble steps, gripping the heavy clock. The front door was unlocked. I slipped inside the cavernous foyer, utilizing the heavy shadows of the architecture to mask my entrance. The house echoed with the shrill, demanding voice of Genevieve. I moved silently across the rugs, tracking the sound to the grand conservatory. What I witnessed froze the blood in my veins. It was a scene of absolute psychological subjugation. Julian, the vice president of finance for a $50 million manufacturing firm, was literally crawling on his hands and knees. He was holding a microfiber cloth, frantically polishing the base of a massive bronze sculpture. Genevieve was standing directly above him, sipping an espresso. She glared down at him with undisguised revulsion. "You missed the entire left side, Julian," she snapped, her voice cracking like a physical whip. "I explicitly instructed you to use the imported wax. Are you genuinely this incompetent, or do you enjoy living in absolute filth?" Julian fumbled with the cloth, his hands trembling violently. "I am sorry, Genevieve," he muttered, his voice stripped of all dignity. He did not dare look up at her. "I will apply the wax immediately," Genevieve scoffed loudly. She kicked the edge of his shoe with her designer heel. "Work faster. The art appraiser arrives in an hour, and I refuse to have my collection presented in a state of squalor caused by your laziness." I watched my son wither, his posture completely collapsing. The arrogant executive who had lectured me on tax law was non-existent. He was a terrified hostage in his own home, bowing to a tyrant. I took a heavy, deliberate step onto the hardwood, letting my shoe crack loudly. Julian scrambled to his feet instantly, his face burning with profound humiliation as he brushed the dust from his knees. Genevieve pivoted, her eyes narrowing as she spotted me holding the vintage clock. Vanessa emerged from the adjoining library, freezing in place when she saw me. "Arthur," Vanessa stated, her tone instantly defensive. "Why are you inside the house without ringing the bell?" I plastered a warm, naive smile across my face. "I brought this for the new library," I said, lifting the clock. "I wanted to reiterate my apologies for this morning. I overstepped, and I want to respect your autonomy. I just want our family to be at peace." Genevieve eyed the antique clock, a smug, victorious sneer spreading across her face. "Well, that is surprisingly decent of you, Arthur. Place it on the credenza and ensure you do not scratch the mahogany." I set the clock down gently and turned to Julian. He was staring at his own shoes, thoroughly humiliated. I needed to test the depth of his captivity. "Julian," I said casually, keeping my tone light. "While I am here, I wanted to quickly review the Q3 supply chain metrics for the new aerospace contract. Are we still projecting a delay on the titanium shipments?" It was a rudimentary question. Julian opened his mouth, but Vanessa immediately inserted herself between us, physically blocking him from my view. "Julian is off the clock today, Arthur," she barked, her voice harsh and commanding. "We are strictly focused on curating my mother's estate. Your little metal shop can wait until Monday. He is not permitted to discuss stressful corporate logistics today." I looked over her shoulder at my son. He merely nodded, staring blankly at the wall. "Vanessa is right, Dad," he whispered, sounding completely hollowed out. "I am occupied here. We will discuss the supply chain later." The psychological horror was absolute. My son had been stripped of his autonomy, his wealth, and his voice. He was a subservient tool being utilized for their financial gain. "Of course," I replied, maintaining my oblivious facade. "I apologize for interrupting. I will just use the restroom and leave you to your day." I bypassed the conservatory and walked purposefully toward the guest wing. I knew exactly which room Genevieve had claimed as her architectural library. The heavy double doors were open. I slipped inside the quiet room. It smelled of expensive leather and fresh paint. I moved quickly to the massive drafting table. My eyes scanned the surface for any loose documents. As I stepped around the chair, my shoe clipped a heavy brass wastebasket. It tipped over, spilling its contents across the floor. I knelt immediately to clean it up before the noise attracted attention. As I reached for a crumpled piece of heavy cardstock, a brightly colored crest caught my eye. I carefully flattened the paper against my knee. It was a final demand notice from a notorious international auction house based in Geneva, known for dealing in black market antiquities. The letter was addressed directly to Genevieve. The aggressive red typography demanded an immediate wire transfer to settle massive outstanding debts for fraudulent art acquisitions. I stared at the horrifying numbers. Genevieve was not a wealthy aristocrat sheltering assets. She was a degenerate fraudster, drowning in tens of millions of dollars of international syndicate debt for purchasing stolen and forged artifacts. And she was using my son and my employees' pension fund to keep the European syndicates from ending her life. I carefully recrumpled the demand letter and placed it exactly where I found it, in the brass bin. My hands were shockingly steady. Despite the hurricane of realization destroying my mind, I stood up, adjusted my tie, and took a deep breath. I walked back out to the conservatory. Vanessa and Julian were standing in the exact same defensive posture. I offered them a polite, weary smile, playing the defeated father perfectly. I wished them a wonderful afternoon and walked out the front door. The drive back to my house was executed in total silence. The horrifying puzzle was complete. Julian was not just a naive husband, he was an active accomplice in a massive corporate embezzlement scheme. When I walked into my kitchen, Eleanor was pacing frantically. I poured a glass of water, sat her down, and told her everything in hushed tones. I detailed Julian's degrading subjugation, the deleted pension files, and the black market antiquities debt hidden in the trash. Eleanor buried her face in her hands, weeping as the sheer scale of the nightmare washed over her. He is stealing from our workers to fund her criminal debts. We have to call the FBI. Arthur, she whispered, terrified. We have to stop him before he destroys the entire company. I shook my head slowly, gripping her hands. No, I replied with iron absolute resolve. If we bring in federal agents prematurely, Julian will simply wipe the encrypted servers. He is the VP of Finance. He controls the digital infrastructure. He will claim I am a demented old man making paranoid accusations, and Vanessa will corroborate his lies. We cannot win a war of hearsay. I need irrefutable forensic evidence downloaded directly from the central mainframe, and I must extract it without triggering his security protocols. I spent the remainder of the evening performing the role of the oblivious retiree. I watched a documentary with Eleanor, ate a quiet dinner, and went to bed early. I needed Julian's surveillance to reflect a harmless old man. But sleep was impossible. I lay in the darkness, waiting for the world to go completely silent. At 2:30 a.m., I slipped out from under the covers. I walked to my home office and locked the door. I booted up my encrypted laptop. It was time to raid the digital fortress of the company I had built. Julian was arrogant enough to believe his modern cybersecurity was impenetrable. When I promoted him, he locked me out of the administrative dashboards. But he forgot one critical detail about Sterling Precision. I engineered the original network architecture 25 years ago. Before we had an IT department, I coded the legacy administrative backdoors directly into the physical servers. I opened a command terminal and began executing strings of archaic code that hadn't been utilized in 2 decades. The screen blinked, bypassing Julian's modern firewalls entirely. I was inside the master financial ledger. I ignored the sanitized quarterly reports and dove directly into the raw, unfiltered vendor disbursement logs. I spent an hour scanning thousands of legitimate invoices for raw steel, shipping logistics, and payroll. Julian had buried his theft masterfully. My eyes ached, but I kept scrolling. Then, I found the anomaly. It was a recurring, highly classified monthly payout authorized solely by the VP of Finance. $40,000 categorized under the ambiguous title of European Logistics Consulting. The vendor was listed as Heritage Consulting Group. I traced the routing numbers. The funds were being wired directly into an offshore account in Zurich. Heritage, Genevieve's fake LLC moniker. Julian was siphoning $40,000 a month from my company's operating revenue and funneling it to his mother-in-law to pay off international art syndicates. The sheer audacity was paralyzing. I reached for the trackpad to initiate a mass extraction of the ledger. I needed the hard files. But before the progress bar could even render, my entire screen froze solid. The monitor flashed a blinding, violent crimson red. A massive security warning dominated the screen. Fatal breach, legacy override detected, alerting VP Finance immediately. Julian's modern security patches had contained a hidden tripwire. He now knew, with absolute certainty, that someone was inside his central nervous system. I didn't hesitate. I held down the power button until the laptop died completely. The room plunged back into darkness. My heart raced. Julian would receive that automated alert on his phone instantly. Given the massive federal crimes he was committing, panic would overtake logic. He wouldn't wait for the IT department in the morning. He would track the IP ping directly to my house. I had to be ready. I pulled a stack of old medical insurance forms and retirement brochures from a drawer and scattered them chaotically across my desk. I made the room look like the desperate workspace of a confused elderly man trying to understand his health coverage. I went back upstairs, got into bed, and watched the digital clock tick toward dawn. At 6:15 a.m., the violent screech of tires in my driveway shattered the silence. A car door slammed with aggressive force. Seconds later, frantic, heavy pounding rattled my front door. I told Eleanor to stay in bed. I put on my bathrobe, intentionally tying it crookedly, and ruffled my hair to look disoriented and frail. I shuffled heavily down the stairs and unlocked the door. Julian stood on the porch, bathed in the pale morning light. He looked like a man standing on the gallows. He was wearing yesterday's clothes, his eyes bloodshot and darting frantically around my foyer as if expecting a SWAT team. "Dad," he choked out, forcing his way inside. "We have a catastrophic situation at the plant. The central mainframe was breached at 2:00 a.m. Someone executed a legacy administrative override. My security protocols traced the physical IP address to this house. Did someone break into your office?" He was desperate to know if I was the hunter, or if an anonymous hacker was stealing his illegal ledgers. I let my shoulders sag. I rubbed my temples, unleashing a long, pathetic sigh of absolute embarrassment. "Oh, Julian," I mumbled, refusing to meet his eyes. "I am so incredibly sorry. I had no idea I caused a security event. There is no hacker. It was just me." Julian turned into a statue. The last drop of color drained from his face. "You?" he whispered in sheer terror. "What were you doing in the central mainframe at 2 a.m.? I shook my head, playing the technologically incompetent fool. I couldn't sleep. I came down to check my Medicare supplement plans and my private pension yields, but that new portal you installed is impossible. I couldn't find my documents. I kept getting error messages. So, I tried typing in my old master passwords from the 90s, hoping it would bypass the new menus. The screen started flashing red, and the computer completely froze. I got so frustrated, I just yanked the power cord out of the wall. I am so sorry I woke you up in a panic. I feel like a complete idiot." I looked up at him, my eyes wide and apologetic. I watched a wave of intoxicating, profound relief wash over his entire body. The sheer terror in his eyes evaporated, instantly replaced by his characteristic, sickening arrogance. He threw his head back and exhaled loudly, treating me like a toddler who had colored on the walls. "Unbelievable," Julian scoffed, his tone dripping with patronizing disgust. "You unplugged the machine. Dad, you cannot randomly input deprecated code into a modernized server architecture. You triggered a level 5 security cascade. I thought European hackers were destroying our company, and it was just you throwing a tantrum over a medical form." He placed a heavy, dominant hand on my shoulder. "Listen to me very carefully. You are getting far too old to interact with this technology. You are going to cause a disaster. If you need your insurance papers, you call my assistant, and she will print them for you. Do not ever attempt to access those servers again." I nodded meekly, staring at the floor. "You are right, Julian. I will leave the technology to you. I am sorry." Julian patted my shoulder condescendingly. "Go back to sleep, Dad. Let me handle the real work." He turned and walked out. I watched his car speed away. The instant he was out of sight, my posture straightened. The trembling stopped. I retrieved a secure burner phone from my safe and dialed a number. "Marcus," I said, my voice stripped of all emotion. "I need you to completely dismantle my son's life." Marcus Vance was a ghost, a forensic auditor who specialized in tracking offshore corporate fraud. When I hung up, the trap was officially set. I spent the next 3 days maintaining my facade while Marcus excavated Julian's digital footprint. The following Thursday, Eleanor had invited Julian, Vanessa, and Genevieve over for a family dinner. It was a tradition, but tonight it was a reconnaissance mission. They arrived at 7:00 p.m. Julian was relaxed and confident, convinced he had neutralized the threat. Vanessa played the doting wife, and Genevieve swept in complaining about the humidity and the smell of our cooking. We sat down at the dining table. Eleanor served a beautiful roasted chicken. Genevieve looked at the food with undisguised contempt. "This is so quaintly rustic, Eleanor," Genevieve sneered, prodding a potato with her fork. "It reminds me of peasant food I was served in the countryside of France. You must allow my personal chef to teach you how to properly plate a meal." Eleanor flushed with humiliation but remained silent. Vanessa laughed softly, adding, "Don't worry about it, Mom. Eleanor just isn't used to our standard of fine dining yet." I smiled obliviously, ignoring the venom. "We are just simple people, Genevieve," I said cheerfully. "I am just thrilled we are all together." Underneath the heavy mahogany table, my burner phone vibrated. I unlocked it stealthily. It was a message from Marcus Vance. First message: Vanguard Heritage is a hollow shell. No legitimate business. Only a funnel for incoming wire transfers. I took a bite of chicken. The phone vibrated again. Second message: breached the Heritage Consulting ledger. Julian is transferring $40,000 monthly from Sterling Precision to Zurich. From Zurich, it is instantly routed to a notorious antiquity syndicate in Munich. Genevieve owes them $4 million for forged artwork. They are threatening her life. My blood boiled. Julian was sitting across from me, drinking my wine, completely unaware his empire was collapsing. My phone vibrated a third time. a long, urgent pulse. Third message. Arthur, step outside now. It is worse than operating funds. He touched the third rail. I wiped my mouth, excused myself for a breath of fresh air, and walked out the back door. I slipped through the garden to a dark alleyway where Marcus was parked in an unmarked sedan. I climbed into the passenger seat. His laptop illuminated the dark car. Tell me, I demanded. He is not just stealing operating cash, Marcus said grimly. $40,000 a month wasn't enough to satisfy the syndicate. Julian needed a massive injection of untraceable liquidity. He hacked into the Sterling Employee Pension Fund. He has already siphoned $5 million from the principal reserves to pay Genevieve's black market debts. The betrayal was staggering. He was stealing the retirement of hundreds of innocent families. But Marcus wasn't done. He pulled up a scanned document. Julian knew the federal auditors would eventually catch the missing pension funds. He needed a fall guy. He forged legal declarations using your digital signature. He made you the sole guarantor of Genevieve's syndicate debts. He authorized the pension drain in your name. If the feds raid the company, every paper trail leads directly to you. You go to federal prison, and Julian walks away clean. I stared at the forged signatures. They were perfect. But Marcus pulled out one final document, sealed in plastic. Julian knows the annual audit is next month. He isn't going to wait for the feds. He and Vanessa drafted this emergency medical conservatorship petition. They are filing it in a closed court session on Monday. They will testify that you have rapid onset Alzheimer's and are destroying the company. The judge will grant them total medical and financial control. They plan to lock you in a highly secure wellness facility in the Swiss Alps, completely isolated from the outside world. They will silence you, take the company, blame the missing funds on your dementia, and erase their debts. They were going to bury me alive. I looked at Marcus. The paternal love I had held onto was completely extinguished. I told Marcus to secure the evidence and trace every stolen cent. I walked back into the house, ready for war. The next morning, I delivered the performance of a lifetime. I walked into the kitchen, stared at Julian, and called him by my deceased brother's name. I intentionally left my car keys in the refrigerator. Julian and Vanessa were euphoric. I watched them secretly documenting my cognitive decline on their phones, gleefully building their court case. While I played the decaying patriarch by day, I executed a ruthless counteroffensive by night. Working with Marcus and my senior attorneys, I quietly liquidated my massive personal stock portfolios, moving the cash into impenetrable blind trusts. We placed federal holds on the forged guarantor documents. But my fatal strike was structural. Decades ago, I personally financed the construction of our main aerospace factory. The corporation held a massive mortgage lien on that facility. I legally transferred that lien entirely into my private trust. I transformed from the vulnerable founder into the supreme, untouchable creditor of my own company. If Julian seized the company, he would inherit a mountain of debt payable exclusively to me. By the end of the week, my wealth was secure, his leverage was neutralized, and I had enough forensic data to send him to federal prison for a decade. But I needed to capture his true, malicious intent on record to destroy his medical conservatorship defense. I went to my office and drafted a document on gold-embossed corporate letterhead. I titled it Irrevocable Assignment of Blind Trust and Transfer of Executive Authority. It was a complete, voluntary surrender of my entire life and company over to Julian. I left the signature line blank. I placed it perfectly in the center of my desk with an antique silver pen. I hid a micro camera inside a vintage radio on the bookshelf, streaming directly to my burner phone. I left the office door cracked open. I walked into the kitchen, yawned loudly, and told Julian and Vanessa I was leaving important papers on my desk and going to sleep deeply. I went upstairs, told Eleanor to pack a bag, and we slipped out the side door. Marcus was waiting in a car. We drove to a secure hotel downtown and connected the live feed to a monitor. Eleanor and I sat in the dark hotel room, watching my empty office. At 1:15 a.m., the office door creaked open. Julian and Vanessa crept into the room like professional thieves. Julian turned on the desk lamp. He saw the document. He leaned over, his eyes scanning the dense legal text. A grotesque, euphoric smile spread across his face. "Look at this," Julian whispered, trembling with exhilaration. He actually drafted it. The old fool is handing over the entire empire. He is so terrified of his memory loss, he is voluntarily surrendering. Vanessa snatched the paper. She let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "I cannot believe this," she sneered. "I thought we would have to battle him in court. He really is just a demented cash cow." Julian picked up the silver pen. "We don't even need to forge it. I will bring this to the charity gala at Genevieve's house tomorrow night. I will play the concerned son, tell him he looks exhausted, and he will sign it willingly to save face. Once he signs this, we secure the rest of the pension, pay off the syndicate, and finalize the conservatorship on Monday. We lock him in that Swiss facility, and we have total control." Eleanor sobbed uncontrollably into my shoulder. devastated by her son's pure evil. I held her hand, my eyes locked on the monitor. "Let them have their gala tomorrow," I whispered. "It will be their final night of freedom." Saturday evening arrived with a suffocating humidity. Eleanor and I drove to the Vanguard Heritage Estate. Genevieve was hosting a massive charity gala, filling the mansion with the city's elite to showcase her stolen wealth. We walked inside, met by a string quartet and walls of expensive floral arrangements. Genevieve was draped in diamonds, holding court. Julian stood nearby, clutching a black leather portfolio tightly against his chest. When Julian saw me leaning heavily on a walking cane, a prop I bought for the occasion, he relaxed. Vanessa rushed over with a fake smile. "Arthur! Eleanor! We are so glad you could make it, especially given your unpredictable energy levels. Arthur!" she announced loudly. I let my hand shake violently as I patted her arm. "Thank you," I rasped. "My mind has been playing terrible tricks on me. I'm just glad I didn't get lost." Julian guided me to a plush armchair, placing the black portfolio on a side table. "Rest here, Dad. We have some important family business to discuss after dinner." I sank into the chair, watching the grotesque display. Genevieve paraded around, bragging about the artwork she bought with my employees' retirement funds. As the evening progressed, the guests moved into the grand dining room. Julian sat across from me, his eyes glued to the leather folder. Genevieve, intoxicated by her perceived dominance, decided to humiliate my wife one final time. "Eleanor," Genevieve announced, her voice silencing the room, "since the hired help is incompetent, be a dear and go fetch the coats for the guests who are leaving early. You are so naturally suited for domestic labor." The room gasped in uncomfortable silence. Eleanor flushed crimson but stood tall, refusing to argue. Vanessa smirked. I stopped cutting my steak. I placed my silverware down with deliberate precision. I stopped trembling. I sat up perfectly straight, looking directly into Genevieve's eyes. "My wife," I said, my voice resonating with deep, terrifying authority that shattered my frail persona entirely, "is a woman of immense substance. You, Genevieve, are a hollow fraud drowning in syndicate debt for forged antiquities. Do not ever speak to her again." The silence in the dining room became suffocating. Genevieve's jaw dropped. The elite guests stared in absolute shock. Her illusion of royalty was instantly obliterated. Her shock rapidly boiled into unhinged fury. "How dare you!" Genevieve shrieked, shattering her wine glass against the floor. "You come into my estate and disrespect me? Julian, handle your demented father right now, or I will have him thrown into the street." Julian leaped to his feet, his face flushed with panic. His plan was unraveling in front of the city's elite. "What is wrong with you?" Julian hissed, leaning over the table. "You are having an episode. Apologize to her right now, or, I swear to God, I am putting you in a permanent medical facility tomorrow morning." He grabbed the black portfolio, ripped out the gold-embossed surrender document, and slammed it onto the table in front of me. He pressed the silver pen into my hand. "Sign this and apologize." Now. I looked at the pen. I gripped it with both hands and snapped the silver barrel completely in half. Ink bled across the forged document. I looked dead into Julian's terrified eyes. "You are fired," I said. Julian froze. He stumbled backward. Before he could speak, the heavy dining room doors swung open. Marcus Vance walked in, flanked by 4 federal agents wearing jackets emblazoned with the FBI Art Crimes and Financial Fraud Division insignias. The guests gasped. The elegant gala instantly became a crime scene. Julian looked from the agents to me, the horrific realization dawning on him that I had orchestrated this entire collapse. "My son," I announced to the silent room, "has spent months pretending I am losing my mind. The truth is, he is a desperate criminal. He embezzled $5 million from the Sterling Employee Pension Fund to pay off Genevieve's illegal debts to an international black market antiquities syndicate." Genevieve shrieked, clutching her diamonds as the crowd recoiled from her. "He forged federal documents to frame me," I continued, my voice echoing with righteous fury. "And he planned to lock me in a psychiatric ward on Monday to cover his tracks." Julian collapsed to his knees on the Persian rug, sobbing uncontrollably. Genevieve tried to bolt toward the kitchen, but 2 federal agents intercepted her, slamming handcuffs onto her wrists. She screamed hysterically as they dragged her out of her own gala. I pulled a crisp legal document from my jacket pocket and threw it onto the ruined table. "And regarding this estate," I stated coldly, "you assumed the $1.5 million was a gift. It was legally structured as a corporate loan tied to your employment. Since you are terminated for gross embezzlement, this loan is in catastrophic default. I am executing an immediate foreclosure. Sterling Precision owns this house. You have 24 hours to vacate before my security team throws you onto the pavement." Vanessa let out a blood-curdling scream. She spun around and slapped Julian across the face with all her strength. "You promised me we were safe," she shrieked. "I am filing for divorce tomorrow. You are completely on your own." She stormed out of the house, abandoning him on the floor. Julian crawled toward me, grasping at the hem of my trousers. "Dad, please," he begged, weeping pathetically. "Please don't let them send me to prison. I will do anything." I looked down at the parasitic creature at my feet. I felt absolutely nothing. I pulled my leg free, offered my arm to Eleanor, and we walked out of the mansion, leaving the wreckage of his life behind us. By Monday, the headlines were devastating. Genevieve was denied bail and remanded to federal custody. Vanessa filed for emergency divorce. Julian was completely ruined, his reputation obliterated. I returned to the factory and called an all-hands meeting on the manufacturing floor. I stood before my terrified employees and told them the truth about the theft. Then, I announced that I had used my liquidated personal wealth to instantly and completely refund every stolen dollar back into their pensions, matching their next quarterly contributions as an apology. The profound, tearful loyalty I received in return proved who my actual family was. Eleanor and I sold our large house and bought a quiet, secluded cabin near a vast lake. We found absolute peace. Months later, in the dead of winter, a brutal blizzard hammered the region. The temperature dropped to freezing, and snow piled high against the windows. At midnight, the front door rattled with frantic knocking. I walked to the entryway, turned on the porch light, and opened the door. Julian stood there, unrecognizable. His clothes were filthy and torn, his face gaunt and bruised. He was shivering violently in the freezing storm, possessing absolutely nothing but the clothes on his back. "Dad," he choked out, falling to his knees in the snow. "Please. I have nowhere to go. I am freezing. I am starving. It wasn't my fault. Vanessa and Genevieve manipulated me. They forced me to do it." Even completely destroyed, he remained a coward, incapable of accepting responsibility for his own breathtaking greed. "Please, Dad," he begged, his tears freezing on his cheeks. "I don't want to come inside. Just let me sleep in the tool shed so I don't freeze to death." I stared down at the man who had plotted to bury me alive in a sterile room. "I gave you an empire," I said, my voice cutting through the howling wind. "I gave you a legacy of honor. In return, you tried to put me in a cage to feed your own endless greed. You are no longer my son. You are a consequence, and consequences are faced alone." I stepped back and slammed the heavy door shut, locking the deadbolt with a resounding crack. I walked back into the living room, where the fire crackled warmly. Eleanor looked up at me from her armchair. I smiled, sat beside her, and took her hand. "Blood dictates biology, but loyalty and respect dictate family. Protect your peace, and never allow those who view you merely as collateral damage to seek shelter in the sanctuary they attempted to destroy."